The room went silent as she opened her bag and placed the document on the table. It wasn't a request, it wasn't a plea. It was the deed to the restaurant, her name on every line. While the manager who had ordered her removal tried to find words that would never come, the silence cut through the air like shattered glass, and everyone present understood, too late, that they had judged exactly the wrong person. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment below with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us what city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The Lumiere restaurant occupied the 13th floor of a corporate high-rise with windows that framed the city like gallery paintings. Tables were arranged with calculated geometry, each illuminated by golden pendant lights that transformed dishes into works of art. The Italian marble floor reflected measured steps, and the controlled murmur of conversations created an atmosphere where every word seemed to have been weighed before being uttered. Carolyn pushed through the revolving door at 11:40, feeling the immediate contrast between the humid street heat and the air conditioning that met her with a blast of indifference. Her simple clothes, black sweatpants, a loose cotton top, worn sandals, contrasted sharply with the Italian suits and designer dresses that dotted the dining room. Her 7-month rounded belly announced a presence that the trained eyes of the establishment preferred to ignore. She approached the reception desk, where a hostess with her hair pulled back in an immaculate bun was adjusting reservations on a tablet. The woman looked up, assessed Caroline in 3 seconds, and returned to the screen without a word. Caroline waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. "Good morning," Caroline said. Modulating her voice in a cordial but firm tone, the host sighed, as if interrupted from a crucial task. "Yes? Like a table for one, please?" The hostess's gaze swept over Caroline again, this time lingering on her belly, her worn sandals, her unadorned hair. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked." Caroline looked at the dining room. She counted 6 empty tables, strategically placed near the windows. On one of them, an arrangement of fresh tulips awaited occupants who had not yet arrived. "Are those tables reserved?" "Yes, all of them," the hostess. "May I wait for one to become available?" An awkward silence settled. The hostess exchanged glances with a waiter passing by carrying a young man, soft-featured, quickly averted his eyes. Caroline registered the discomfort in his expression. "Our restaurant caters to an executive clientele. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable finding another place," the host. But the subtext cut across the room like a sharp blade. It wasn't about reservations. It was about belonging. Caroline felt the collective weight of the gazes now converging on her, some curious, others already laden with prejudgment. She didn't respond immediately. She let the silence work in favor of the truth. Then, with deliberate calm, she walked to the sofa near the entrance and sat down. She opened her bag, took out a small notebook and a pen, and began to take notes. The hostess frowned but didn't dare intervene. 12 minutes later, Claire Thompson emerged from the kitchen. General manager of Lumiere for 3 years, she commanded the operation with an iron fist and a velvet glove. Her military bearing, her navy blue blazer without a wrinkle, her heels announcing her arrival 5 paces before she appeared. Everything about her communicated undeniable authority. Upon spotting Caroline on the sofa, Claire felt irritation rise up her spine. She approached with measured steps, her commercial smile already set on her face. "Afternoon, may I help you?" Caroline looked up from her notebook. She observed Claire with the same as the dining room. "Waiting for a table?" "I understand," Claire said, maintaining a cordial tone. "But, as my colleague informed you, we are fully booked for the entire executive lunch service. Perhaps I can recommend other establishments in the area that cater to more diverse profiles." The word diverse hung in the air, laden with unspoken meanings. Caroline slowly closed her notebook, put it in her bag, and for an instant, Claire believed she had won. Then Caroline spoke, loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I will wait. If no table becomes available in 30 minutes, I will understand that this establishment's protocols follow specific criteria. Claire felt the first real discomfort. There was something in Caroline's demeanor, in her precise choice of words, in her complete lack of subservience that clashed with the image she had cultivated. But it was too late to back down without appearing inconsistent. As you prefer, Claire replied, turning away with studied indifference. Caroline returned to the sofa. She observed the flow of the dining room. At 12:10, a four-top table became available near the window. Caroline waited. The hostess led an executive couple directly to that table, completely ignoring the waiting order. Caroline made a note in her notebook. Again, at 12:20, another table became available. This time, it was a trio of lawyers who immediately occupied it. Caroline remained still, but her gaze registered every movement, every decision, every protocol broken. It was then that Ryan, the young waiter who had averted his eyes earlier, approached discreetly. He bent down slightly, as if tidying magazines on a coffee table, and murmured, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this isn't right." Caroline looked him in the eyes. Ryan was no more than 22, his uniform impeccable, as if just from the laundry, but his eyes carried a moral disquiet Dermot had not yet stifled. "What's your name?" "Ryan." "Ryan, do you believe protocols exist to serve people or to select who deserves to be served?" The question pierced Ryan like a sharp arrow. He didn't know how to answer. Caroline smiled for the first time, a sad but understanding smile. "Don't answer now. Observe." Observed. At that moment, Caroline saw Claire observing them from afar. Her eyes narrowed, calculating risks. The manager picked up the internal phone and made a brief call. 3 minutes later, the building security guard entered the restaurant. Caroline felt the tension increase. The symbol she had identified from the start, the discreet plaque on the wall with the motto, "Excellence is Tradition," now revealed its true nature. It wasn't about quality of service, but about who was permitted to receive it. At 12:35, exactly 30 minutes after her declaration, Caroline stood up. She walked to the counter, where Claire awaited her with an impenetrable expression. "Your wait is over," Claire said, unceremoniously. "Yes," Caroline replied, "but my observation has only just begun." And then, to everyone's surprise, she didn't leave. She turned to the security guard and said, in a clear voice, "I request that you officially record that I was denied service at this commercial establishment open to the public without technical or legal justification after 30 minutes of waiting, during which 6 tables were occupied by other customers." The security guard, disconcerted, looked at Claire. The manager forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. There's no denial of service. There simply are no tables available." Caroline opened her bag. She pulled out the first document, a notification of an inspection scheduled for that very day, issued by the City Health Department, requesting a surprise audit of service and accessibility protocols. The paper trembled slightly in Claire's hands as she read it. Caroline put the document away, turned her back, and walked toward the exit. But before passing through the door, she turned one last time and said, for all to hear, "Protocols exist to protect dignity, not to manufacture exclusions." The phrase echoed in the awkward silence. Ryan, standing near the bar, felt something change inside him. It was as if a blurred lens had suddenly been cleaned, revealing the moral architecture of the place where he worked. When Caroline left, the dining room remained suspended in collective discomfort. Claire put the notification in her blazer pocket and ordered everyone back to work. But something had been planted, an invisible seed of doubt, discomfort, and shame. No one knew that woman wasn't a rejected customer. She was the true owner of Lumiere. Claire Thompson locked herself in the manager's office at 1:15. Compact space, filled with files and spreadsheets, transformed into a war room. She reread the notification 3 times, searching for loopholes. There were none. The inspection would arrive at 3 o'clock. She pressed the intercom. "Ryan, Come here, now." The young man ascended the internal stairs with hesitant steps. He knocked on the door, entered. Claire stood, arms crossed, eyes piercing. "You spoke with that woman." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I just... Ryan began. "You have no authority to make decisions here. Your job is to serve those who are seated, not to question management." Ryan swallowed hard. "Thompson, it won't happen again." "Hope not, because if it does, you'll be looking for a new job before the end of your shift." Ryan left. He closed the door, leaned against the corridor wall, taking a deep breath. Something inside him resisted that fear. He didn't know exactly what it was. Meanwhile, Claire opened her laptop and accessed the reservation system. She began to review records from the last 3 months, looking for patterns that might compromise the official narrative. She found 12 instances of unavailable tables for walk-in customers without a history in the system. She deleted internal comments that identified socioeconomic profile or appearance. She replaced them with technical justifications, confirmed prior reservation, table maintenance, corporate event. In 20 minutes, the official story was rewritten. At 1:40, Claire called an emergency meeting with the team. 10 employees gathered in the service area amidst stacks of plates and dessert trolleys. Claire positioned herself at the front, hands on her hips, the posture of a general before battle. "We have an inspection today. I want everyone to understand something very simple. This restaurant follows strict protocols. Nothing that happened today had any relation to discrimination. Understood?" I asked if you understood. "Yes, ma'am," they responded and understood. "If anyone is questioned, the answer is, we follow reservation and availability criteria, nothing more. Any deviation from this version will be treated as insubordination." Jenkins, a cook with 30 years at the establishment, adjusted her sauce-stained apron and dared to speak. "Claire, that young woman was right. There were empty tables." The silence that followed was cutting. Claire slowly turned to Mary, like a predator identifying prey. "Mary, you work in the kitchen. Your job is to prepare dishes, not manage the dining room flow. But I saw. You saw what you wanted to see. And if you keep seeing things that don't exist, perhaps it's time to consider retirement." Mary lowered her eyes. Claire swept her gaze across the group, establishing absolute dominance. "Anyone else have something to say?" No one spoke. "Excellent. Everyone, back to your stations." At 2:00, Claire received a call from Mark O'Connell, the partner who managed Lumiere's financial side. He rarely appeared in person, preferring to manage through spreadsheets and monthly reports. The voice on the phone sounded eerie. "Claire, what's going on?" "I received an alert about a surprise inspection." "Under control," Claire replied. "Administrative routine. In 3 years, we've never had a surprise inspection." A dissatisfied customer made an unfounded complaint. Already removed all sensitive records. "When the inspectors arrive, they'll find full compliance." "You sure?" "Absolutely." A lie. Claire wasn't sure of anything, but admitting weakness, and weakness, in her philosophy, was a professional death sentence. Meanwhile, on the ground floor of the building, Carolyn waited in a discreet coffee shop. 2:15, 45 minutes left. She opened her laptop and reviewed the documents she had compiled over 6 months. Anonymous customer complaints, reports from dismissed employees, tampered financial reports that Mark sent to her, believing he was communicating with a third-party accountant. Every piece of the puzzle fit with surgical precision. She hadn't bought Lumiere by chance. She had inherited the property where the restaurant operated, but management had been delegated to Mark O'Connell, a distant cousin who had promised to professionalness. For 2 years, Carolyn had received impeccable reports, growing profits, positive reviews, expanding clientele. Then, 6 months ago, a former employee approached her personally. The woman, dismissed after questioning discriminatory practices, brought proof, audio recordings, internal messages, colleague testimonies. Carolyn listened to everything in silence. She showed no surprise. She promised no revenge. She simply thanked her asked for absolute discretion, and began her own investigation. She discovered that Mark not only permitted discrimination, he encouraged it, believing that a selective profile would generate premium clientele willing to pay more. The spreadsheets he sent omitted costs of labor lawsuits settled with silent agreements. They also omitted the systematic diversion of 10% of revenue to an offshore account, recorded accounting-wise as international consulting. Caroline compiled everything, but she didn't act immediately. She needed something more, public, undeniable proof that would not allow for alternative narratives. She needed to be personally humiliated in front of witnesses so that the turnaround would have unquestionable moral force. That's why, that morning, she had dressed in simple clothes, deactivated her building's VIP access badge, and entered like anyone else. That's why she endured the stares, the veiled hostility, the rejection disguised as protocol. Because she knew that every gesture recorded, every word spoken, every calculated silence would be used not only to remove Mark, but to completely reform the culture of the place. 2:45, the inspectors arrived. 3 health department technicians, accompanied by a consumer rights auditor. Claire greeted them with a professional smile, offered coffee, and presented documentation organized into thematic folders. The inspection began in the kitchen. Mary Jenkins was questioned about hygiene protocols. She responded with technical precision. Then they asked about service. Mary hesitated. She looked at Clara, who was observing from the doorway. Then she said, "We follow protocols." But there was a specific complaint about service discrimination. The auditor, "I don't know anything about that," Mary reverting her eyes. The auditor made a note. Claire breathed a sigh of relief. Ryan was next. They took him to the service area. They asked the same questions. Ryan looked at the floor. He thought of Carolyn, of the question, do protocols exist to serve people or to select who deserves to be served? There was an incident today. Ryan, his voice trembling. Claire stiffened. A pregnant customer was denied service, even with available tables. The auditor looked up. Claire stepped forward. "Ryan, you're confusing availability with confirmed reservations." "I'm not," Ryan replied with growing firmness. "I saw tables being occupied by walk-in customers without prior reservations. I saw you tell the hostess to direct that young woman out." Claire felt control slip through her fingers. "That's false. And is a new employee. He doesn't fully understand our systems yet." "Worked here for 8 months," Ryan countered. "Lee, and I know the difference between a reservation and discrimination." The silence that followed was absolute. The auditor wrote everything down. Claire felt the first real tremor of fear. At 3:20, the inspectors concluded their visit. They found no sanitary irregularities, but the consumer rights auditor requested copies of service records from the past 6 months. Claire handed over the edited files. The auditor thanked her, but her gaze made it clear that the investigation was just beginning. When the inspectors left, Claire turned to Ryan. Her voice was pure ice. "You're fired. Gather your belongings and leave." Ryan didn't argue. He put his uniform in his locker, put on the worn shirt he'd brought from home, and went down the stairs. In the lobby, he found Caroline waiting near the elevator. She extended a business card. "You did the right thing. When all this is over, look me up. I'll need people like you." Ryan read the name. His face turned pale. "You are—" "Yes," Caroline said. "I'm the owner." Caroline returned to Lumiere the next morning at 10 o'clock. This time, she wore a tailored gray suit, mid-height heels, and an executive briefcase. She crossed the lobby with measured steps, greeted the doorman by name, and went straight up to the 13th floor. The hostess didn't recognize her immediately. She smiled automatically, that commercial smile reserved for clients who exuded status. "Good morning. May I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak with Claire Thompson." "Ms. Thompson is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" Carolyn placed her briefcase on the counter, opened it slowly, and retrieved the second document, the registered deed for the property where the restaurant operated, updated the previous month. with her name highlighted as the sole owner. The hostess read it, reread it. Her face went through 3 progressive shades of white. I'm sorry, I don't apologize, Caroline said. Just tell Claire that the owner is waiting for her in the dining room. The young woman darted up the stairs, heels pounding the steps at a frantic. Caroline walked into the dining room, chose the central table, one with a panoramic view, traditionally reserved for VIPs, and sat down. She opened her laptop. She waited. 3 minutes later, Claire descended the stairs like a contained typhoon. She wore the same navy blue blazer, but her military bearing had given rigidity. She approached the table with controlled steps, her face a mask of Ms. Mendez, what a surprise. I apologize for not being informed of your visit. Don't need apologies, Claire. I need answers. Carolyn rotated the laptop so Claire could see the screen. A detailed spreadsheet with 17 cases of discrimination complaints over the past 12 months, all filed without investigation, all resolved with out-of-court settlements whose values were not included in the official financial reports. Claire turned pale. These cases were handled according to legal protocol. Whose legal protocol? Caroline asked. Calm, but incisive. You report to Mark O'Connell. Mark reports to me. At no point did I receive a report on labor lawsuits or discrimination settlements. Mark considered them operational issues. Now, systematic discrimination isn't an operational issue, Claire. A criminal one. The dining room was empty at that hour. But 2 waiters were setting up tables for lunch. They slowed their movements, trying to catch fragments of the conversation, Caroline noticed, and slightly raised her voice. Intentionally. Yesterday, I was treated as an intruder in this restaurant. I was rejected because my appearance didn't match the profile that you and Mark consider appropriate. And when witnesses dared to tell the truth, you threatened them with termination. Claire tried to regain control. Ms. Mendez, there was a misunderstanding. The restaurant was genuinely full. Claire, Caroline interrupted her, resting her hands on the table. Don't make me play the security recordings that prove otherwise. Absolute silence. Claire felt the floor give way beneath her. Recordings? This building has an integrated monitoring system. As the property owner, I have unrestricted access. I reviewed yesterday's footage. I saw every empty table being occupied by walk-in customers without reservations while I waited. I saw you instructing the hostess to direct me out. I saw you threatening Ryan. Claire didn't respond. There was no possible response. Caroline opened a second tab on her laptop. But what brought me here today wasn't just the personal humiliation. It was this. The screen showed financial transfers between Lumiere's account and an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. 10% of monthly revenue systematically diverted, recorded as international consulting. Claire immediately recognized the digital signature, Mark O'Connell. Did you know about this? Caroline asked. No, Claire replied. I swear I didn't know. You knew about the discriminatory practices. You knew about the silent settlements. You knew this place operated by selecting customers based on appearance and status, violating federal consumer protection laws. Claire lowered her eyes. The professional mask crumbled. I just followed directives. Mark used to say that a selective profile was a market strategy, that premium clients paid more, that human dignity is negotiable when profit is at stake? Caroline completed. Tears began to stream down Claire's face. She didn't wipe them away. Caroline closed her laptop. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below, where thousands of people struggled daily for respect, for opportunity, for being seen as complete human beings, not as selectable profiles. Claire, I'm going to do 2 things today. First, remove Mark O'Connell from any association with this establishment and forward the case for criminal investigation. Second, offer you a choice. Claire looked up, confused. A choice. You can leave now with a termination letter without cause and find employment where your practices are tolerated, or you can stay but under new conditions, temporarily reduced compensation, mandatory participation in a re-education program on human rights and diversity, my direct supervision for 6 months. If at the end of that period you demonstrate real change, you will regain your position and salary. Claire processed the words slowly. It was humiliation, but it was also a chance. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Because I believe people can change when confronted with the truth of their actions. And because firing you would solve my problem, but it wouldn't transform the culture of this place." Prolonged silence. Then Claire spoke, almost inaudibly. "I accept the second option. Good. From now on, every employee of this restaurant will participate in monthly training on service ethics. We will implement an anonymous feedback system where customers and employees can report inappropriate conduct without fear of retaliation. And this plaque," Caroline pointed to the motto, "Excellence," "will be replaced." "By what?" "To serve is to recognize the other as equal." Claire closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was something different in them. It wasn't complete redemption. It was the painful beginning of recognizing the weight of her choices. At that moment, Mark O'Connell entered the restaurant, oblivious to everything. He wore an Italian suit, his hair perfectly combed, the air of someone who absolutely controlled everything. Upon seeing Caroline, he smiled condescendingly. "Caroline? What a surprise! You should have told me you were coming. I would have arranged a proper welcome." Caroline slowly turned. Her gaze was polished steel. "Mark, you are removed from your position. Your system access was blocked 15 minutes ago. The authorities have been notified about the financial irregularities, and your contract has been terminated for cause." Smile froze. He looked at Claire, looking for support. "This is absurd. You can't." "I can." And I did. Caroline placed a sealed envelope on the table. "Here's the evidence. Transfers, tampered accounting records, internal communications where you instructed employees to prioritize customers with an appropriate profile. Everything documented, everything traceable." Mark opened the envelope with trembling hands. He read the first few pages. His arrogance evaporated like mist in the sun. "Caroline, we can talk. This was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a crime, and it will be treated as such." But Caroline raised her hand, silencing him. "You transformed a space that should serve people into an instrument of exclusion. You profited from indignity, and worse, you did it using my name, my assets, my reputation. There's no possible conversation." 2 security guards entered the dining room. Caroline nodded. They escorted Mark out, while he still tried to protest. His voice faded as the elevator descended until it disappeared completely. Caroline turned to Claire. "General, meeting with all staff." Now. At 11 o'clock, 23 employees gathered in the dining room. Waiters, cooks, hostesses, security guards, cleaning staff, all occupied chairs arranged in a semicircle. The tension was palpable. Rumors had spread through the corridors. Mark had been removed. Claire had cried. The true owner had revealed her identity. Caroline positioned herself at the front and with no table or podium between her and the team. She wore the same gray suit, but had removed her blazer, leaving only her shirt and visible pregnant belly. It was a deliberate gesture to show vulnerability, not distant authority. "My name is Carolyn Mendez. I'm the owner of this building and, consequently, this restaurant. Most of you don't know me. Some didn't even know I existed. That changes today." Absolute silence. Mary Jenkins, in the back, wiped. Ryan, who had been called back that morning, observed Caroline with a mix of admiration and relief. "Yesterday I entered here as a customer. Didn't notify anyone. Use credentials. I wanted to see how this place treated ordinary people. What I discovered wasn't just disrespect. It was a system." Caroline activated the projector. The first image showed the spreadsheet with 17 cases of discrimination. The second, a graph comparing average waiting times between premium profile on clients and others. The difference was brutal, 3 minutes versus 42. These data cover 12 months. 17 formal complaints, all filed, all resolved with money and silence. But I can't stop asking myself, how many people simply left without complaining? How many accepted the humiliation, internalized the rejection, and moved on believing they didn't deserve to be here? Some employees lowered their eyes. Others maintained eye contact, but their expressions showed growing discomfort. You didn't create the system alone. Mark O'Connell implemented it. Claire executed it. But each of you, at some point, participated. Whether by averting your gaze when someone was mistreated, whether by repeating ready-made phrases about an executive profile, whether by remaining silent when injustice happened before your eyes. Caroline's voice wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. Each word cut through layers of denial until it exposed the naked truth. So we need to decide, now, what kind of place this will be from now on. Because there are two options. Either we completely transform the culture of this establishment, or we cease operations today. Murmurs of surprise echoed. Caroline raised her hand. This is not a threat. It's a recognition that some structures are so corrupted that they cannot be reformed. They can only be demolished and rebuilt. But before making that decision, I want to hear from you. A prolonged silence. Then Mary Jenkins stood up, her trembling hands resting on the back of her. Ms. Mendez, I've worked here for 30 years. I've seen this restaurant grow, seen managers come and go, and I've seen a lot of wrong things happen. But I was afraid to speak up, of losing my job, afraid of being too old to start over. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. Yesterday, when I saw you sitting on that sofa, pregnant, tired, being treated that way, I thought of my daughter. I thought if it were her there, I'd want someone to do something. And I did nothing. Mary sat down, sobbing. Caroline approached, knelt before the cook, and held her hands. Mary, you're doing it now, and that's what matters. Another employee stood up, Julian, a waiter with 15 years at the establishment. I also saw wrong things, but I thought it was normal, that every fine restaurant operates like this, that we had to protect the premium experience. I never thought I was protecting prejudice. More people began to speak. Confessions, apologies, painful recognitions of silent complicity. Caroline listened to everything without interrupting. When the last employee finished, she returned to the front of the semicircle. What happened here is it's a reflection of a society that taught you to measure human worth by appearance, by clothes, by accent, but you can choose differently. Now, Caroline projected the third image, the new service protocol. It was simple, radical in its simplicity. Every customer will be greeted with the same standard of courtesy. Every available table will be offered in order of arrival. Every employee who witnesses discrimination has a moral and institutional obligation to intervene. This is the new standard. It's not a favor, it's an obligation. And it will be audited monthly by an independent external firm. Carolyn paused. She swept the group with a firm gaze. But protocol isn't enough, because you can follow rules and still carry prejudices. So I'm going to ask for something harder, that each of you review your own choices, that you ask yourselves when you started to accept indignity as normal, when you decided that serving meant selecting who deserves to be served. Absolute silence. Carolyn walked to the plaque with the old motto, "Excellence is tradition." He removed it from the wall. Tradition does not justify injustice. It never did. And from now on, the only excellence that matters is treating every person who walks through that door as a complete human being, worthy, deserving of respect. He placed the plaque on the floor and, with a deliberate movement, stepped on it. The plaque cracked. It was a symbolic gesture, but necessary. Now, I need you to decide. Those who remain here with me, rebuilding this place, will undergo intensive training. It won't be easy. It won't be comfortable. You will be forced to confront beliefs you may have carried for decades. But I promise, if you genuinely commit to this transformation, I commit to you. One by one, the employees stood up. Mary Jenkins was the first, then Julian, then all the others, except two. The veteran waiter and the hostess who had rejected Caroline the day before. They remained seated, looking at the floor. Caroline approached. "You don't agree?" The waiter spoke, his voice laden with resentment. "With all due respect, ma'am, this is idealism. The world doesn't work that way. Premium clients pay more. They deserve differentiated treatment." "Deserve?" Caroline echoed the word. "Ben what? On how much money they have? On what clothes they wear?" "Based on economic reality," Caroline nodded slowly. "I understand your point, and I respect your right to think that way. But this establishment will no longer operate under that logic. So, if you cannot embrace the change, it's best you look for another place to work." He stood up, gathered his belongings, and left without another word. The hostess hesitated, but eventually followed him. Carolyn turned to those who remained. "Anyone else want to leave?" "No." "Good. Then let's begin." 6 months later, Lumiere reopened with a discreet ceremony. There was no champagne or celebrities, just Carolyn, the reform team, and 50 carefully selected guests: human rights activists, representatives of social movements, former employees who had been wronged, and Ryan, now promoted to service supervisor. The dining room had been redesigned. The elite tables near the windows no longer existed. All tables had the same quality, the same lighting, the same access to the view. The new plaque at the entrance shone discreetly. "To serve is to recognize the other as equal." Caroline, now with a 3-month-old son in her arms, spoke briefly. This place was built on exclusion. Today, it is reborn on inclusion. But we don't celebrate victory. We celebrate commitment, because transformation doesn't happen in a day. It happens in every daily choice to treat people with dignity. Mary Jenkins served the first dish of the evening, a simple dish of meatloaf and mashed potatoes, which she herself had chosen to symbolize that good food doesn't have to be inaccessible. Claire, who had remained and rigorously completed the re-education program, observed from the side. The tradition had been maintained, but her demeanor was different, less military, more human. She approached Caroline at the end of the night. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked, "for not giving up on me." Caroline smiled. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." The restaurant did not immediately regain its premium clientele. Many executives migrated to other establishments where appearances still dictated privileges. But new customers came: families, students, workers, people who had previously not felt welcome in refined spaces. And gradually, Lumiere became a reference not only for good food, but for humanized service. 3 months after the reopening, the City Human Rights Council invited Caroline to present the re-education model as a case study. She brought Mary and Ryan to testify. "What we did isn't revolutionary," Caroline explained to the audience. "It's basic, but it was forgotten. So we had to relearn that serving doesn't mean bowing down. It means recognizing the fundamental equality between human beings." The story gained national media attention. Newspapers published reports. Television programs invited employees for interviews. Mary Jenkins cried when she saw her photo on a magazine cover with the headline, "Courage at 60. Cook who fought discrimination becomes a symbol of transformation." But for Caroline, the true measure of success wasn't in the headlines. It was in the details, in the genuine smile of the new hostess as she welcomed customers of all ages and appearances, in Ryan's firmness in intervening when a customer tried to demand a better table, in Mary's peace as she prepared dishes, knowing they would be served with the same respect to everyone. One evening, 6 months after the reopening, a young pregnant woman, dressed in simple clothes, entered the restaurant and greeted her personally. "Good evening. Welcome to Lumiere." The young woman looked around, unsure. May I come in?" Ryan smiled. "Of course. You always can." He led her to a table near the window, served water immediately, and explained the menu patiently. The young woman gradually relaxed. At the end of the meal, she called Ryan over and asked, "All restaurants like this?" "Could be," Ryan replied. "This one is, always will be." When the young woman left, Ryan found Caroline in the kitchen. What? Someone came in expecting rejection and found dignity. Caroline then were doing it right. 2 years later, Caroline launched the Humanized Service Certification Program, offered free of charge to commercial establishments. The curriculum included modules on unconscious bias, respectful communication, and anti-discrimination protocols. 30 restaurants joined in the first year, 60 in the second. Mary Jenkins retired at 65, but returned weekly to teach classes in the cook training program. Claire became a specialized consultant in institutional re-education, working with companies that wished to reform toxic cultures. Ryan took over as general manager of Lumiere, implementing constant innovation, an affordable menu on Tuesdays, an internship program for young people from underserved communities, partnerships with human rights NGOs, and the plaque at the entrance, "To serve is to recognize the other as equal," became a frequent photograph on social media, a symbol shared by social movements, reproduced in schools, cited in debates on business ethics. Mark O'Connell was sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement and fraud. He served half of his sentence in a halfway house. On release, he tried to open a new restaurant, but investors refused to associate with him. Eventually, he moved to another city, where he works as a mid-level manager at a fast food chain. He never publicly acknowledged his errors. Carolyn had 2 more children. She expanded her model to other businesses, a bookstore, a medical clinic, a vocational school. In all of them, she implemented the same principles, and in all of them, the motto remained, "To serve is to recognize her as equal." One Sunday morning, Caroline took her 3 children to Lumiere for breakfast. The eldest, 6 years old, observed the plaque at the entrance and asked, "Mom, what does that mean?" Caroline knelt, looked into her son. "It means no one is worth more than anyone else, that every person deserves respect, that when you grow up, you will never judge someone by the clothes they wear or the money they have." The boy nodded seriously. "Thomas." Caroline hugged him, and at that moment, looking at the dining room where it all began, she realized that the true transformation wasn't protocols or training. It was in planting seeds of dignity in each generation, so that one day, ideally, no pregnant woman would need to prove she deserved to be served. Carry forward what the truth demanded of you today. Do not be silent when someone's dignity is violated. To serve is to recognize the other as equal. Begin now.